Hello from Amsterdam, and welcome to this session where we will be going into experimentation. Where is it now? How can you apply it in your business? But also, how is it developing from just marketing optimization, where we know it from, to maybe other parts of your business or even other industries where it typically is applied in? I'm Chris. I'm head of data at DEPT, looking into how can we, on the one hand, gather all interaction data from all the platforms you're active on, both platform and campaigns, but also combining that data with other sources you have so that we can create really relevant audiences for you to deliver your content or campaigns on all the platforms and campaigns you're active on. And together with me today,
I'm Liz. I'm from Optimisely. I lead our strategy and value team. We really look at researching with our customers to understand where can we identify further areas to drive value for your business digitally? How can we understand what's happening with digital optimization as an industry? And how do we bring that, again, to all the companies we work with to really accelerate the value you're gaining from your digital tooling? So I'm really excited to be here at DEPT and really diving into these topics that's so important to our companies.
Liz, we have a lot of clients that either are in their early phases running their first A/B tests, or that might have a higher maturity level where they're already actively having this as a part of their backlog, or maybe even have a certain percentage fully data driven. What do you see as the state of experimentation, the developments in the market, whether you are a early stage beginning or more developed?
Well, it's really interesting to see how the industry has developed in the past 10, 15 years or so. Let's say about 10 to 12 years ago is when you started to see a lot of these A/B testing tools come to the market. And at the time, it really was limited to marketing teams, fairly simple use cases, some text changes, some color changes. And I think for a lot of companies, they're still limited in thinking about testing in those simplistic use cases. It's a great place to get started, but there's so much more now. I think for a lot of our e-commerce customers, they've now been doing some version of testing, experimentation, personalization, and optimization for more than 10 years. It's really a critical must-have for e-commerce businesses. And so they're some of our most advanced customers that are now expanding their use cases into much more sophisticated types of testing. They're also expanding into having different types of teams really engage in an experimentation mindset. So for example, in product, in development, where they're actually testing out potential features, building things like a minimum viable experiment before they even commit to build what that feature or product could be. In contrast, though, especially in the past 2 years, we've seen a complete sea change in the types of companies that are coming to Optimisely, because now any company that has a digital property really is looking to understand how can they optimize and improve that digital property. And key parts of that improvement means personalization, means experimentation, means getting relevant data and being able to act upon it to provide a better experience for your customers. So it's fascinating to see how even some of the most traditional companies you can imagine are now really moving to say, we have a website, we need to ensure that we're getting the metrics and learning from that and shifting to more of a test and learn mindset, to moving into that experimentation space. I assume DEPT is probably seeing similar as well.
Yeah, I especially like where you mentioned the shift between just testing out a couple of things, changing a color, to testing whether should I indeed develop this part of my platform or this product, and getting a feel of how the audience responds to it before making sort of development decisions or investment decisions. Really making sure that it literally is data-driven development and not just a creative focus which leads to a product and then trying to optimize it, but making sure that whatever you decide on is also the best choice because you validated that this and these matches to the audience. I especially even like those kind of experiments where we call those the painted door tests, where you just, for example, add a functionality, but only the button, people click on it, and then you just see, hey, there is an interest. You might even put a form behind it to get some additional input on, why are you interested, what are you looking for? So you get some qualitative input before actually developing such an idea. And I think that definitely is something that you see if you further progress on the amount of experimentations you can grow towards.
And it's really interesting to see which teams are owning what, because I think traditionally what we've seen a lot of times, marketing teams or growth teams might own experimentation initially, where even with that painted door test, maybe someone from marketing has the idea of like, what if we had this additional feature? Can I make a business case that it's really worth investing in building this out and put this on there? But I think really in the past 3 to 5 years, we've now seen this shift where product teams are owning more and more of that themselves, because ultimately I think those are the metrics they're looking at as well. How do I identify what's worth, driving a business outcome to build? And how do I drive more adoption? And factoring in that test and learn approach to the very, very beginning of that product development cycle. I think this is where we really see the big difference between some of our most advanced customers and those that are earlier on that journey is that mindset change and how they've been able to adopt this across their business, all the way up to the chief product officer, the chief technology officer, really also thinking about this not just as an output, not just how much code or how many features are we delivering, but what's the business outcome? How valuable is that feature or function that we're building? What value does that actually bring to our end users? Is it worth the investment of our time? And I think ultimately to get there, you have to have a test and learn approach. You have to be able to build that into your workflows earlier on, and start from the very basic idea. How can we build something, again, we call it a minimum viable experiment, but this concept of a very simple test, like a painted door test or some basic functionality on the feature that you're exploring, to see, is this actually worth our time? Is this something where we're going to drive the outcome we want to see? Or do we need to abandon that project? And that's okay. That's great. I think, being able to identify those failures earlier on and then pivot to shift the resources to focus on the highly impactful projects, that's where we really see this momentum picking up and the flywheel turning with the product and development teams to see, okay, now we know where we need to iterate. Now we know where we need to focus the resources. So not waiting for an A/B test at the very end of the line when things have already been developed. It's not just about, refining what you're building, but actually defining what to build and building that roadmap and prioritization together.
Yeah, I especially remember those moments where you find a failure. Those make the most impact, and that's when the team is most alert. Like, hey, but what did we just learn, and how should we move from this moment on?
Yeah.
And when you start beginning an experimentation, you'll be looking for winners and what should I change to make more money. Where the things that fail, they often teach you the most and prevent you from all kinds of decisions.
Yeah.
So that's really valuable input.
Yeah, and I think when we start working with a company, I think oftentimes what we'll see is, finding that core team that has like a lot of enthusiasm and ideas, but they're also sitting within a larger business that might be more traditional, might be used to operating more from a hierarchy and top-down ideas. And we want to look at how we can empower them to have their ideas reach farther across the company. And so usually what we recommend is maintain that energy and the ideas and the focus on learning and realizing that failure is actually really powerful. But you probably do want to start. In your first few months, you probably do want to start with those quick wins.
Everyone's looking for a winner.
Exactly. It's making that business case of like, why is this valuable? And look at what we've been able to do. So identifying those key user problems, starting with those initial experiments that you can really drive that success story. But then as you drive that success story, as you're getting into like 6-9 months, the first year of the program, starting to make that shift, especially as these teams like do more internal communications and communicating to the most senior levels, of saying, well, look, here's this failure that we had. Here's an experiment that we really thought would win. And we saved the company all this money because we learned it's actually not worth the investment. It's not worth putting that feature out there. That's when you start to see that magic happen. And even at the most senior levels, C-levels are thinking, maybe some of my assumptions weren't right. Maybe I do need to rethink my approach. Maybe I need to go back to looking at the users and getting back to that focus on customer data and evidence really driving the approach for the business.
We also see that in a lot of, I would say, both clients and colleagues that being open to the fact that you might not have the full truth, and you know, just be vulnerable and let's try out a couple of things, and you know, the experiment will tell me what the truth is.
Yeah,
that's a big shift to make. But if you're able to make that shift and you're just open to let the data, let the audience tell me which way I should move forward, and accept that as the reality, and that's when the experimentation really starts to you know, give you actual and way bigger business results.
Yeah.
But you do have to step sort of across your ego and across your idea of your truth.
Yeah, and we oftentimes talk about like almost like a maverick personality as well, because what's key to think about if you're leading a team that's doing some form of testing or optimization for the first time, don't limit yourself to a silo. Don't just think about here's my scope and here's my remit. Really think about the business outcomes overall, because again, a great starting point is that team and is that core scope you have today. But there's so much benefit for the broader business. And it's really key as you start growing the program that you communicate what you learn to the rest of the business so that they can also benefit from that impact. I think where we've seen programs struggle is when they get a little bit more set in the ways of almost like, you know, here we're just delivering, we're just, you know, being an assembly line almost of we're part of the process, here we've done the test, here's the results, you know, just not really thinking outside the box for more. But if they can get that momentum to start communicating that learning to the rest of the business, first of all, I think it's great for individual careers because it helps really elevate that person, but it's also great for their own resources and be able to make the case of you know, helping them get more, you know, maybe data scientists or developers or, you know, marketeers on the team to be able to think more holistically about how can we drive this adoption across the business and, again, spread that benefit to additional teams.
On that point, like if you want to spread out to additional teams, you know, typically we know experimentation from optimizations in a marketing perspective. You know, I want to improve my site, my shop, my campaigns. And do you also see applications for this method in you know, product or other parts of businesses?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think at the core, it comes down to shifting to an outcome-based model for development. This is something I think as we're seeing like adoption of things like feature management and other methods of really developing more efficiently, we're seeing more and more companies shift from just here's my endless list of tickets that I need to develop and kind of put the code out there to really be able to prioritize and say, here's what we think will actually drive better business outcomes. Again, this is better for the development teams in the long run because it also shows that direct connection from an individual developer's work to how much that has impacted the customers, the business, the revenue, et cetera. But it's a shift, I think, that's really happening across the board in the industry a bit slowly. And some companies are really leading at the forefront of this. Others are still more in the output-focused model of just delivering that code. I think this is where marketeers and product teams can really help their development colleagues get more of that impact and act more efficiently. It's also, it's better for everyone's well-being and lifestyle as well, in the sense of shifting away from the need for, you know, urgent last-minute releases or bug fixes that are causing dev teams to have to, you know, hop on board in the middle of the night and keep the site live. If you're actually testing in advance and learning from that, releasing the new code behind a flag that can be easily pulled back if need be, you're actually shifting your entire development process to be much more efficient and again, be able to remove those painful rollbacks. So you're able to operate as you know, more of a you know, 9 to 5 without those kind of painful late night releases. And I think that's one of, it does directly impact lifestyle and retention, but it starts with that culture of like, what is the culture of the team? And how do we ensure that they're also, you know, adopting some of these methods and thinking more around like, where is the business going and how do we ensure that what's prioritized is focused on those business outcomes?
I think also the part of prioritizing that interests me, since taking data from a bit of a broader perspective, we're often active on, you know, what I mentioned on defining audiences, making use of those for personalization. But we also see in a lot of our collaborations that's being done primarily in the marketing campaign channels, so more in search and more social, for example, than on the platform, because people also often perceive it as a barrier. They say, yeah, but I need to create all this content and I need development to be able to deliver personalizations. That also leads up to discussion, hey, am I going to make these personalizations in, for example, Optimizely, or is it something that I should build on top of my platform? And also leads to the discussion, where should I then put in the time of the developers? Where I can also imagine that using Optimizely, you could even save time on that backlog, because on the one hand, you could use it to just make personalizations and deliver to audiences present. On the other hand, there might also be benefits to have them from the development directly on your CMS. How would you look at that?
I think it depends a lot on like where a customer is in their personalization journey and what particular use cases they're trying to solve for. So as an example, if you've never done any sort of personalization before, yes, there's a good chance you're probably going to be starting with some key audiences or segments, or maybe like fundamentally at least behavioral targeting, but probably you're building more advanced segments than that. And there probably are some fundamental experiences that are very different for those different audiences and different groups. So I always recommend start with testing out whatever those experiences might be. Start with the user data, identify those strong hypotheses, identify different possible solutions, test those solutions. And when you identify what tests are winning, depending on the use case, you really may want to hard code in some of those changes. I think if this is something you think is going to be more fundamental, more consistent across the board, that a larger group of users is going to benefit from, then it probably makes sense to really put that into the code. But that being said, users are changing so fast. And as you're getting more and more advanced in personalization, where we really see this industry going is toward one-to-one personalization. It depends on the data you have. It depends on your audiences and whatnot. For example, I think a lot of our recommendation products right now are really focused on this one-to-one experience where a marketer or a product manager, whoever is managing the tool, is not going to actually need to do the work of setting up any sort of individual segments, because every single time that a customer comes to that site, that unique customer is delivered a unique experience. But if you're not at that point yet, where that's where your company needs to be, there's probably also some experiences you're looking at. How do I ensure this change, this different experience for a broader audience or a broader segment, and wanting a bit more of that control? In that case, that might be something where we're coming up with the holidays right now. This is something where, because it's more temporary, maybe you actually would use a tool like Optimizely to actually push out those experiences to those particular groups with the messaging that's relevant for this time. I'm always of a fan of, when you're thinking about what goes into your code, thinking about kind of what's the time impact of that. Developers are always a scarce resource. So building in, if this is something that's going to have certain seasonality, that might be a great fit to use Optimizely. Of like, use that experience, use it temporarily. We also have a method called a multi-arm bandit, which is something that's very popular during this time of year, because again, with the seasonality, it's all about pushing the kind of getting to the conversions and getting that unique experience live, which might not be something you want live in other times during the year. So I think starting with where is your company today? What audiences do you have? What kind of personalization do you do today? And what use cases are you looking at developing? And then there's probably a combined strategy of all three of these methods of having some things that are going to be hard-coded in, that again are that more consistent experience, some things that you might use Optimizely to really push out for particular audiences and identify what that targeting is, and some experiences that are truly one-to-one, that are the algorithm is really owning what those unique users see. How are you seeing this with your customers as they're kind of evolving as well?
I think often they're looking for the business case. Like, should I do it or shouldn't I? Growing from is it a winner, yes or no, to really basing on, should I develop this product and or should I even prioritize it on my backlog? I think especially on the first point you made, where you said, hey, some things you might want to hard code in. I think in that sense, it's very smart to run it as an experiment first. So one, whether it's worth it or not. And two, also to be able to create the business case to prioritize it, to spend development resources or develop a certain expansion of whatever you're delivering. So really see it where you grow from the I'll just change the color to I'll decide what I'll do, and also I'm able to prioritize what I do with the results internally, and still make a decision whether is it something that will keep on being present. Maybe you want to build it in, and indeed if it's seasonal, just make use of the flexibility that you can offer, and put it on or off whenever you need to.
Yeah.
Also touching upon on results, how do you measure the effect? And as I mentioned, if you want to make business cases, there's a lot of different KPIs where you could define the result on. And I often also find it interesting where people grow from at first, they'll be looking into how many tests did I have and what was the conversion uplift. So looking in the short-term gain, but growing towards I'll be looking into the amount of tests and maybe literally the velocity that you're making. How do you look at that? The development of the kind of KPIs that are relevant and how they change over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know one of the exercises that I think both of our companies do when we first start working with customers is really building that prioritization framework of mapping out kind of from the very top level, what is the main KPI of your business? Are you driving purchases? Is the website driving lead generation? Is it maybe more informational, that it's something of like helping customers navigate more easily between it? What's the purpose that your digital properties are trying to solve for? And then breaking down each of those input metrics of what influences that. So conversion rate obviously is a key element that factors in, but conversion rate's not the only metric. So I always recommend starting with that framework and then identifying what's the most urgent need. So many customers will have a reference point of like, here's the goal that we're trying to get to, here's where we are today in terms of our baseline. Where is that biggest delta? And then when you look at that framework, what are those metrics that are most going to influence that top line business goal? That's where I typically recommend starting, of like, these are kind of urgent business needs that, again, can show that success, can show that learning, and that are directly tying to the overall outcome that the business is trying to achieve. But then thinking constantly holistically about it. So one method I kind of recommend avoiding is something we call throwing spaghetti at the wall. It's this concept of you just are throwing an ad hoc test here and there, seeing what sticks, but there's not a really consistent strategy behind it. And so you're missing that overall framework of what's leveling up to the business outcome you're trying to achieve, and where should we go next. So taking that time to build that strategy from the beginning is really key, and then revisiting it of, once you get to 6 months and, maybe you've run 20 tests so far, you've got some good results. Do you want to still continue focusing on those key metrics? Has anything shifted? That's where I think you get into that growth. And you're right that as companies grow, as they drive more adoption and that different members of the organization understand what testing means, that's where I tend to see the shift, where it goes from just, can you improve our bounce rate? Can you improve our conversion rate? To how many tests have you run? How much have we learned? All the way to how much have we failed? We have customers that failure rate is actually one of their key goals, because they want to know, how much are we pushing the envelope? How much are we actually learning? How much are we thinking outside the box to have new ideas? And that's kind of this journey that we see. And along the way, there'll be like different sub-metrics that come in. Things like, how are we using our teams more efficiently? Or, what other things can we learning? What else can we be testing that we've missed out on today?
I like your throwing spaghetti at the wall. We often encounter that at clients. It just begins with everybody has loads of ideas, and you do analyses, and you have ideas from creative perspective, and you just start trying out things.
Yeah.
We often try to help those making use of the pie model. So prioritizing on potential and impact and effort to see where, both on the results and the time I need to put into it, would it make the best chance.
Yeah.
So really growing from conversion rate to smart prioritization to eventually how much am I learning or failing. I really like it, because also failing, the more you fail, the more things you also prevent from happening. So you really have a full experimentation culture embedded, if that's a KPI you're looking in towards.
Yeah. That's part of why we recommend having someone take the time to build out like almost program management for the experimentation team. If you're completely new to testing, maybe this is probably partial time, a day a week or something like that you're committing to it. But taking the time to build out that almost like a target. So in contrast to throwing the spaghetti, you're building that kind of bullseye of like, what's the center that you're trying to get to, and what are the other tests and the other ideas that could reach toward it. And absolutely taking all those ideas from different parts of the business and building them into that framework. I think those ideas, that's the magic you want to keep going. But doing so in a way that's structured, that there's a clear prioritization process, that there's clear communication as well, that those ideas are valued, that you've taken them into play, but that you're going to focus on these key ones, resources being a key factor as well, starting with that area and then building in the time of, okay, here's this other great idea. We're going to do that more around month 3 or in a future point. Yeah.
Talking about the future, how do you see... That was a nice bridge, right?
That's very good.
How do you see the developments from an experimentation perspective? Both you and Optimizely looking towards the future of experimentation.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about where experimentation, digital optimization, personalization, where are these going? Where do we really see things in another 10 years? I mean, I don't know if I could say for 10 years from now. I think the whole industry is moving so fast that probably can't predict much there. But it is this shift where we're again seeing more and more companies that maybe haven't traditionally had data at the center of their business. They're realizing the importance of factoring in that data and learning how to use it efficiently and effectively. So not just data for the sake of data, but really like what's the evidence there and how do we act upon this in a smart way. But beyond that, I think it's also a lot of these use cases that are changing. So yes, different teams are adopting this test and learn methodology, which includes then being able to launch experiments earlier on. I think all businesses can really learn from a lot of the successes of Booking right here in the Netherlands, that they've been, I think, running testing since the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, and really now are at the point where they're testing essentially every aspect of their digital properties before it goes live, all the way from search algorithms and code and pricing and everything that a user might not see directly to the front-end experiences as well. But then what we're also seeing from our customers is starting to think about some of the business processes. So we have customers that actually have been testing on their contact centers. Starting with, when you're testing on contact centers, you might start with your self-service help page. What's on the website? How can we identify what are the common reasons that customers are calling in or emailing us? And how can we solve that and give them self-service on our app or our website so the information's there, they can solve it themselves. But then also testing on what's actually that flow when a contact comes in, when a call comes in or an email comes in. How do we make that more efficient as well? How do we be more efficient about what the agents are actually receiving at the end and testing out some of those kind of scripts and help center methods and everything. So really thinking beyond just, what's our website and what's the front end that a customer sees, all the way to all this more holistic aspects of a digital experience and where data is and how can we really learn from that data. It's amazing to see how fast all of this is moving as well. Yeah.
On that, let's summarize what we touched upon. You can really state that experimentation has grown from simply running a couple of A/B tests and trying out a different color or content to something you can really base your development on, or you should be basing your development on. And also growing from just looking into conversion rate to literally the amount of tests and even the amount of fails, so that you're really basing your business, your investment decisions on the things that you're learning from that approach. Also growing from just marketing and platform to broader parts of the business, maybe even touching upon product development. And with that, you could even say that it's going to different industries where typically, this is known for e-commerce, for site and shop development, but is also very applicable to, for example, B2B cases, where in the next session we'll be diving a bit deeper on those details. thank you very much for following our session today. And thank you, Liz, for joining us here in the DEPT office.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to talking to you more in the future.